340 seconds. That is all it took for Alan Hudson to change the entire atmosphere of Stamford Bridge. Not because he scored a 30-yard screamer. Not because he dismantled a defense with a single turn. But because of the sheer, arrogant grace with which he strolled across a pitch that belonged to men twice his age, demanding the ball when veterans were hiding from it. Welcome to the golden era of English football's lost genius. Let's talk about a player who was so brutally ahead of his time that modern pundits still watch old footage and shake their heads in disbelief. Back in the late 1960s and early 70s, English football was a game of mud, sweat, bruised shins, and bootlace knee tackles. It was a sport built for industrial workers and hard men. Then came Alan Hudson, a skinny kid from Chelsea's youth system who treated a football like it was attached to a piece of string. Chelsea's hardman defender Ron Harris, a man known for taking no prisoners, once admitted that Hudson was simply playing a different sport from everyone else on the training ground. Dave Sexton, Chelsea's meticulous manager, had a love-hate relationship with him. Sexton wanted tactical discipline. Hudson wanted to improvise jazz on a heavy metal stage. Let me be fair for a second. Sexton wasn't entirely wrong to worry. Hudson had a wild streak from day one. He questioned authority before questioning authority was cool. He didn't care about your tactical blueprint if it meant passing backward instead of threading a killer ball through the eye of a needle. By 1970, 19-year-old Hudson was running Chelsea's midfield. Even England's World Cup-winning manager, Sir Alf Ramsey, pulled him aside, whispering about a future where the national team was built entirely around his vision. And then disaster struck. Right before the 1970 FA Cup final against Leeds United. A brutal, bone-crunching affair that became legendary, Hudson suffered a severe ankle ligament injury. Just gone. Bye-bye. He missed the match. He watched from the sidelines as Chelsea and Leeds kicked lumps out of each other in a notoriously violent replay. But Hudson didn't stay down for long. By 1971, he was back. And he wasn't just playing, he was orchestrating. Chelsea reached the European Cup Winners' Cup final against the mighty Real Madrid. In Athens, against the Spanish giants, a 20-year-old Hudson ran the show. Chelsea lifted the trophy. The boy wonder was on top of the world. Everyone thought this was the start of a decade-long dynasty. No one knew the cracks were already spreading beneath the surface. The money was rolling in. The fame was swelling. And Alan Hudson was quickly learning that English football institutions hated nothing more than a player who refused to bow down. By the mid-70s, the relationship between Hudson and Chelsea manager Dave Sexton had completely fractured. Hudson wasn't hiding his disdain for rigid tactics. He was frequenting London nightlife, clashing with the board over contracts, and making it clear that he answered to a higher power, his own instincts on the pitch. To the suits at Stamford Bridge, he was becoming a liability. To the fans, he was a god. But football executives always win the political war, even if they lose the soul of the club. In 1974, Hudson was sold to Stoke City. A downgrade? Not on your life. At Stoke, under manager Tony Waddington, Hudson found a sanctuary. Waddington built a team of mavericks and technical players, men like Jimmy Greenhoff and Alan Bloor. And he handed the keys of the kingdom directly to Hudson. Even legendary Liverpool manager Bill Shankly took notice. Shankly, a man who rarely handed out compliments to opposing players, famously remarked that Hudson was worth the price of admission alone, calling him a footballing artist who saw passes before other players even knew a game was happening. And for a glorious, sun-drenched period at the Victoria Ground, Hudson played the best football of his life. He sprayed 40-yard crossfield balls with the precision of a laser-guided missile. Stoke became dark horses for the league title. Around this time, the call finally came from the England senior team. After years of being ignored by establishment figures who distrusted his flair and his personality, Hudson made his debut against reigning world champions West Germany at Wembley. He didn't just play well. He ran the match. England won. The media went wild. So how many caps did this generational midfield orchestrator earn for his country? 2. Just 2. Let that sink in. A player of unmatched vision, praised by Shankly, adored by fans, frozen out of the international setup because the football establishment preferred safe, industrious runners over a creative genius who dared to have an independent mind. Follow the money, look at the politics of the FA, and you see a clear pattern. England has a long, tragic history of chewing up and spitting out players who don't fit the obedient corporate mold. Hudson was public enemy number one for the traditionalists. Every great tragedy needs a third act. And for Alan Hudson, the descent was as rapid and brutal as one of his trademark slide rule passes. By the late 1970s, the heavy lifestyle, the friction with management, and the accumulation of injuries began to catch up. After stints at Arsenal and abroad in America with the Seattle Sounders, the magic started to fade. The knees were grinding bone on bone. The nightlife, once a release valve for the immense pressure of expectation, began to consume him. And then came the financial collapse. When your entire identity is tied up in being a football prodigy, what happens when the boots come off? For Hudson, the transition was catastrophic. Poor business advice, bad investments, tax troubles, and mounting debts stripped away the wealth he had accumulated during his peak years. By the 1990s, the man who once walked the turf of Wembley and the Bernabeu was facing bankruptcy. The football world, fickle and heartless, turned its back. The same pundits and executives who once profited from his genius pretended he didn't exist while he fought personal battles out of the spotlight. Then, in 1997, fate delivered a near-fatal blow. While crossing a street in London, Hudson was struck by a car. The injuries were horrific. He was rushed to the hospital and placed into a coma. Doctors weren't sure if he would wake up. When he finally did, his body was battered, his mobility compromised, and his life reduced to a grueling fight for survival. People wrote him off for good. Ian Wright, years later, speaking about the generation of English players who were discarded by the system, noted that English football has a nasty habit of breaking its own artists. Wright pointed directly to Hudson as the ultimate cautionary tale. A player whose career was cut short not just by bad luck, but by a sporting culture that punished individuality. Yet Hudson survived. He wrote memoirs. He spoke with brutal, unfiltered honesty about his mistakes, his demons, and the game he still loved despite everything it took from him. Let's step back and look at the big picture here. Why do we still talk about Alan Hudson when players who won 10 times more silverware are completely forgotten? Because trophies are temporary, but style is immortal. Hudson didn't just play for stats. He played for expression. He was a punk rock musician playing a classical concerto in an era where everyone else was marching to a military drumbeat. When you look at modern football, where every midfielder is an athletic machine running 12 kilometers a match with zero room for flair, you realize how badly contemporary football needs an Alan Hudson. A player who slows time down. A player who looks up, sees a gap that shouldn't exist, and puts the ball right on a teammate's chest with casual disdain. The establishment won the political battle against him. They kept him out of the England squad. They let him drift into financial ruin. They whispered about his lifestyle while ignoring the structural failures of a game that chewed up working-class geniuses and spat them out when their legs gave way. Drop your verdict in the comments. I read every one. Was Alan Hudson his own worst enemy? Or was he a victim of an English football system terrified of anyone who refused to conform? A like genuinely helps more than you'd think. And subscribe if you want more deep dives into the untold stories, dark histories, and real controversies of football culture. This won't be the last time we expose how the game treats its own. Football at this scale is never just a tournament. It's a moment in time,